Alright, what we all here for? Which NBA superstar benefited the most from their teammates? Every NBA legend needed help. Michael Jordan had Scottie, Pippen, Dennis Rodman, and all those guys. LeBron James had Dwyane Wade, Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis. Stephen Curry had Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and eventually Kevin Durant. Magic Johnson walked into the NBA with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kobe Bryant played with Shaquille O'Neal and then later on Paul Gasol. Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Kawhi Leonard. So when fans say your favorite player only won because he had help, my response, your response should be, okay, but who didn't? Because that's not the interesting question. The actual question should be, which superstar benefited more from his teammates more than any other superstar in NBA history? And that's exactly what we're going to figure out today. Because we are not simply looking at how many Hall of Famers somebody played with. We asking 5 questions. How good were those players when they actually played together? How perfectly did those teammates complement the superstar? How much did those teammates contribute to a championship? How often did somebody else save the superstar in critical moments? And how different would this player's legacy look without this teammate? And once you look at it that way, there are a few names that immediately separate themselves. And so, with all that being said, run the intro. And so let's start with Kobe Bryant, because Kobe is an interesting case. He absolutely benefited from playing with one of the most dominant players ever, Shaquille O'Neal. During the Lakers three-peat from 2000 through 2002, Shaq won Finals MVP all 3 times. And that is important because Kobe was playing next to the most physically dominant player the league, you, your mom, your dad has ever seen. But here's why I don't put Kobe any higher. Because Kobe eventually proved that he could win without Shaq. And that is huge. After Shaq left, there were some ugly years in LA. But then Paul Gasol arrived, and suddenly the Lakers went to 3 consecutive finals from 2008 through 2010. Won back-to-back championships in 2009 and 2010. Gasol was excellent. Lamar Odom, excellent. Andrew Bynum, excellent. Metta World Peace, excellent. But nobody realistically argues that Kobe wasn't the central superstar of those teams. He won both Finals MVPs. So yes, Kobe benefited tremendously from teammates, especially Shaq, but the second half of his championship career demonstrated that Kobe wasn't dependent on one particular superstar teammate to reach to the top. He won with 2 completely different championship constructions. That's why he's 5th. Number 4, we have Michael Jordan. And I already know what's going to happen in the comments. How is Jordan on this list? Come on, nephew. How's Jordan on this list? Because Jordan fans sometimes talk about the Bulls like Michael Jordan was playing 1-on-5. And he wasn't. Scottie Pippen was an extraordinary basketball player. One of the greatest perimeter defenders ever. An elite transition player. An excellent secondary playmaker. And most importantly, he was almost a perfect superstar for Michael Jordan. Pippen did not need 25 shots. He could defend the opposing team's best perimeter player. He could initiate offense. He could rebound. He could run the floor. And his versatility allowed Jordan to concentrate more of his energy on destroying teams offensively. The 1991 finals are a great example. Chicago initially had Jordan guarding Magic, but Pippen increasingly took on the matchup, giving Chicago another elite defensive option against the engine of the Lakers' offense. And Pippen was not alone. During the first three-peat, Horace Grant was an extremely important third option. The Bulls themselves later described Grant as their number 3 guy during that run. Then during the second three-peat, Dennis Rodman arrives. One of, maybe, the greatest rebounder ever. An elite defender. Tony Kukoc gives them another creator. Ron Harper gives them size and defense. Steve Kerr, as we all know, provides the shooting. And Phil Jackson is running the entire operation. The 1998 championship roster alone featured Jordan, Pippen, Rodman, Kukoc, Harper, Kerr, and an extremely specialized supporting cast. And so why isn't Jordan number 1, right? Because here is the counter argument. Jordan was unquestionably the best player on all 6 championship teams. 6 champions, 6 Finals MVPs. There wasn't a championship where we debating whether somebody else carried Michael Jordan through the finals, right? And that matters. Jordan had excellent help, but the help generally amplified Jordan rather than replacing what Jordan was supposed to provide. So, I think people underrate how good Jordan's teams were while simultaneously overrating how much that should diminish Jordan, because both can be true. Coming in, rounding up the top 3 is LeBron James. Now, things get controversial because LeBron's career is unique. He didn't have one Scottie Pippen. He essentially had multiple generations of elite teammates. In Miami, Dwyane Wade, Chris Bosh. In Cleveland, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love. In Los Angeles, Anthony Davis. And when you break down LeBron's 4 championships, his second stars were extremely important. 2012, 2013, Wade and Bosh. 2016, Kyrie averaged nearly 30 points per game in the final 5 games of the finals and hit arguably the biggest shot in Cavaliers history. 2020, Anthony Davis was phenomenal throughout that postseason. So, LeBron absolutely benefited from elite teammates. And unlike Jordan, LeBron actively moved between organizations and helped create different championship teams. That is fair to acknowledge. But there's another side. LeBron also demonstrated that he was the common denominator. Miami became a champion with him. Cleveland had never won an NBA championship before LeBron got them there. Then he went to Los Angeles and won there too. 3 different franchises, 3 different coaches, different teammates, different systems, different stages of his career, and LeBron remained the centerpiece. That's what keeps him from being number 1 for me. Because yes, he had Wade. Yes, he had Kyrie. Yes, he had... But they weren't all standing next to him at once. He repeatedly adapted his game to different teammates and different circumstances. So, his teammates elevated his championship ceiling, but LeBron was usually the person establishing that ceiling in the first place. And so coming in at top 2, right? We have Stephen Curry. Because this is where the debate gets serious, right? Let's lock in for a little bit. Because Stephen Curry benefited from one of the greatest roster constructions in NBA history. Klay Thompson might be the perfect backcourt partner for Steph Curry. Why is that? Because Klay does not need a basketball. He provides elite shooting. At his peak, he provided excellent perimeter defense. And because both guards could move without the ball, defending Golden State became completely different from defending conventional superstar offenses. And then you have Draymond. And Draymond might have been even more important to maximizing Curry, right? Because Draymond could defend almost anyone. He could grab the rebound, he could push the ball, initiate the offense, set the screens, find Curry moving without the basketball. Essentially, Draymond handled responsibilities that allowed Steph to weaponize the most unique part of his game, the movement. But then 2016 happens. I think Golden State wins 73 games. 73 games. They lose the finals. And what happens next? Kevin Durant joins the team. Now Curry has another MVP playing next to him. Not simply an all-star, not simply a Hall of Famer, an MVP level scorer in his prime. And Kevin Durant wins final MVP in both 2017 and 2018. That's why Curry has a legitimate argument for number 1. Think about how absurd the construction was. You had arguably the greatest shooter ever, another historically great shooter, a defensive player of the year, and Kevin Durant. But there is one thing that saves Curry in this argument, if you want to say that. 2022. That championship completely changed the conversation. Durant was gone. Golden State wasn't the same overwhelming super team anymore. Klay was coming off major injuries. The Warriors reached the finals against Boston, and Curry was the centerpiece of the offense and ultimately won his first finals MVP. That championship proved Curry could lead a championship team without Kevin Durant. And that's exactly the series he needed for his legacy. But still, when we're talking about players whose environments maximize their strength, Steph Curry is near the top. And so the moment we all been waiting for, number 1, we have Magic Johnson. And before the Lakers fans attack me, this is not disrespectful to Magic. Magic is one of the greatest basketball players who ever lived. But look at the situation this man entered. Magic gets drafted number 1 in 1979. And who is his teammate? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And this is not some old, completely washed Kareem. Kareem was still elite. The Lakers reached the NBA Finals during his rookie season. And yes, Magic's Game 6 is legendary. Kareem gets injured, Magic famously fills in and puts up 42 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists to close out Philadelphia. That performance is exactly why I'm not saying Magic was carried, because he wasn't. Magic was incredible. But look what happened next. The Lakers eventually add James Worthy. Now Magic has Kareem, James Worthy, Michael Cooper, Byron Scott, and a roster constructed perfectly for transition basketball. The Lakers' own historical account describes Magic, Kareem, and Worthy as the core that defined the powerhouse teams of the 1980s. And Worthy was not just some other guy. We're talking about a 7-time All-Star who won 3 championships and the 1988 Finals MVP. In Game 7 of those finals, Worthy produced 36 points, 16 rebounds, and 10 assists. Think about that. One of Magic's teammates won Finals MVP. Another teammate was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Magic himself was one of the greatest players alive. That is an unbelievable amount of high-end talent. Pat Riley eventually coached a 1987 Lakers team featuring future Hall of Famers Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Worthy alongside Cooper, Scott, AC Green, and others. And stylistically, it was perfect for Magic. He was arguably the greatest transition passer basketball has ever seen, playing with athletes who could sprint the floor, a dominant interior scorer, shooters, finishers, and one of the greatest fast break finishers ever in James Worthy. Magic wasn't simply surrounded by talent. He was surrounded by talent that specifically magnified what made Magic special. That is why he's number one for me. But here's the problem with this entire argument. There is something that we have to acknowledge. Sometimes we punish superstars for having great teammates, when their ability to maximize those teammates is actually part of their greatness. Think about Curry. Does Klay Thompson become the same legendary shooter without the defensive attention Curry creates? Does Draymond's playmaking become as dangerous without defenders terrified of Curry moving behind him? I'm going to answer that right now. That answer is no. Think about Jordan. Scottie Pippen helped Jordan defensively and as a playmaker. But Jordan's scoring gravity also created opportunities for everyone else. Think about LeBron. How many shooters got wide open threes because defenses collapsed when LeBron attacked the paint? Think about Magic. Worthy was incredible. Kareem was incredible. But Magic's passing transformed the Lakers' transition offense. That's why basketball is different from an individual sport. Great teammates don't just help superstars. Superstars help create great teammates. The relationship works both ways. The real question, who needed their help the most? And this is where I'd separate the conversation. If you're asking who had the best teammates, Magic and Curry have incredible arguments. If you're asking whose teammates fit their individual weakness the best, Jordan and Curry become extremely interesting. If you're asking who proved they could win championships in the most different environments, then it's going to be LeBron. If you're asking me who won with the weakest supporting cast, now we're having an entirely different conversation. That's where somebody like Hakeem Olajuwon enters the room. Dirk Nowitzki enters the room. Tim Duncan deserves discussion depending on the season. And that's exactly why counting Hall of Fame teammates is a lazy analysis. You have to look at when they played together, how good they were at the moment, what role they played, and how much responsibility the superstar actually carried. And so, if I'm ranking the superstars who benefited the most from their teammates, I'm going number 5, Kobe Bryant. Kobe benefited enormously from Shaq, but the Gasol championship proved he could lead a completely different championship roster team. Number 4, Michael Jordan. Phenomenal supporting cast and arguably the perfect second star in Pippen, but Jordan remained the clear centerpiece of all 6 championships. Number 3, LeBron James. Played with several elite stars, but did it across 3 different franchises and multiple completely different roster constructions. Number 2, Stephen Curry. Klay and Draymond were almost perfectly designed around his strengths, and then Golden State somehow added Kevin Durant. But 2022 significantly strengthened Curry's argument that he wasn't dependent on a super team. And number 1, Magic Johnson. Because Magic entered the NBA with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, eventually got James Worthy, played for one of the league's premier organizations, and spent his prime surrounded by talent almost perfectly designed to maximize his unique abilities. But I want to make something very clear. Having great teammates isn't an indictment of greatness. Magic still had to perform. Curry still had to perform. LeBron, Kobe, Nobody accidentally wins 5 championships, right? Nobody, and I mean nobody, gets carried into being a top 10 player ever. The point isn't that these guys weren't great. The point is that when we compare legends, we can't pretend they all had the same amount of help. And maybe the biggest mistake fans make when debating NBA history is looking at the superstar while completely ignoring the 5 guys standing around them. And so now I'm throwing the question to you, because which NBA superstar benefited the most from his teammates? Magic, Steph, LeBron, Jordan, Kobe, or is there somebody else I'm completely overlooking? Because I already know this comment section is about to be a war zone. And so, if you like this kind of video, like, subscribe, because we just passed 100 subscribers and we on the road to 200.